welcome to the University of Miami, for those of you who are not from here. For those of you who are currently students, thank you for joining us today. So today we have with us Greg Centineo, who is our interviewee for the day.
He's the good-looking one, by the way. Oh, I meant the two of us.
Oh, of course. So Greg is one of the founding principals of the Pulse Evolution Corporation, which is a digital human animation studio. They are responsible for the Michael Jackson hologram performance at the 2014 Billboard Awards. He advises and consults several high-profile companies. Most recently, he also served as the executive producer for a large-scale independent animated film, where he successfully capitalized the production company and its franchise, moved completely outside the studio structure, which is frankly unheard of in Hollywood these days. He's a pioneer in developing new strategies for entertainment finance and for large independent finance market segments. His experience in the public speaking sector displays his unique ability to convey intangible concepts to the very tangible and comprehensive ideas. Greg is a leader of leaders. He's able to accomplish audacious goals through enthusiasm, high energy, beliefs, and passionate spirit. His style and approach to entrepreneurship is inspiring and authentic, which is why we invited him here today. And he's a serial entrepreneur, so Pulse Evolution is not his first company. I'm sure he'll tell you about some of the others along the way. And he spends his time in between downtown Los Angeles and South Florida. So at any given day, you never know where you're going to find Greg. Interviewing Greg today is Dave Gergely. Dave is currently the golf sales coordinator. He's originally from Allentown, Pennsylvania, where he played baseball, basketball, and golf. He earned a Bachelor in Science degree in Marketing Education at Rider University. He began his career at Shula's in the Graham Company. He's actually the program director for Shula's Athletic Club, and he's also served as the director of sports entertainment at Shula's Steak Restaurant. During his 30 years at Shula's, Dave has always enjoyed golf, and since 2012, in his current position as charity and corporate sales coordinator, he specializes in corporate groups, charity groups, and frankly anyone who wants to enjoy golf at Shula's, particularly on the Senator course. You may also recognize Dave's voice. Dave has actually also co-hosted the popular Saturday morning radio TV show called the JM Lexus Trivia Challenge for the past 18 years. So Greg may look good, Dave sounds better. He has also emceed the Young Filmmaker Awards and countless charity events, including the UM Miami School of Architecture golf event, the Special Olympics, the Ted Hendricks Celebrity Golf Auction, and many more, and currently lives in Miami Lakes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Greg, and hopefully at some point, Dave will also turn it over to you. So enjoy, everyone. Thanks for coming.
And Greg and I were talking ahead of time. This is for you folks. I'm just here to ask some questions. He's going to give you some great insight. If you have questions during the presentation, let them rip. I mean, it's very informal. You're here, obviously, on your time. Your time is very valuable, so feel free anytime to ask questions or raise a hand. We'll come to you and do some questions. I don't know if you had a chance, Greg. I walked around the room, while you were setting up all the fancy stuff, because you guys can do that, and I can't. And the quotes are terrific here. Yeah. One of them was, "If in doubt, begin." And that's kind of where we're at. And I guess that's the story of all entrepreneurship. So I guess what people would want to know, we'll give you a great intro with your bio, but let's go back in the Wayback Machine. I mean, all the way back, obviously, speaking, I know it's not a South Carolina accent. Where did you grow up, and how did you get started in something like this?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys tonight. Really mean that. I love speaking, I love communicating, I love dialoguing and sharing. One of my core philosophies in life, and has been for many, many years, is climb, rest, drop some ropes, pull some people up to where you are, tell them how you got there, and then keep climbing. So this is a really great privilege for me to be here with you. Where did I start? Well, you probably all know. Who can take a guess where I'm from? New York City. Born and raised, 27 years, Brooklyn. Interesting upbringing, actually. I said for many years, until I left at 27, I would not want to live in any other city. There's no better place to be brought up other than Brooklyn, New York, and the streets, until I left. And I thought, what an idiot being in Brooklyn all those years. I should have left a decade earlier. So, born and raised in New York. It's kind of where I started.
And with the family, I know I talked to you on the phone from California, and you paid for it, which I'm glad. Your dad had a big influence in you. Yeah. If you could talk a little bit about how he influenced you and maybe some of the seeds he planted.
Well, my dad was an amazing guy. He passed away about 1.5 years ago in '89. World War II vet, Great Depression. Was brought up in the Great Depression, so had huge fears of losing money, and so he used to save money all over the house, behind the washing machine, underneath mattresses. He didn't believe in banks. He was a multimillionaire and nobody knew it. But he had this phobia and this fear about losing his money. But he was brilliant, he really was. He was a very smart individual, very honest guy, and I have 4 other siblings, and he just taught us some very good principles. Not preaching to us, but kind of teaching us just ways that the world works in his eyes, in his years on planet Earth. And he taught us some amazing things about how to manage money, how to make money, how to lose money. One of the greatest quotes my father taught me as a young boy was this quote. He said, "Greg," he says, "until you learn how to lose money, you will never make money." And so most of us, if not the large majority, are afraid to lose money. And you're not going to make any money unless you lose it. And you're going to, matter of fact, you probably will lose more at times than you make. And then you hope it kind of shifts and turns around. But that's the only way to make money, is to learn how to lose it. So that was one of the, I mean, I could talk all night on my father, just the things that he taught us. And I've been really grateful. It was years after I left home. I left at 27, at 24 actually, never went back. Well, I visited, but never went back. And it was kind of really important for me because, you know, there's an old quote, it says, "A prophet's never welcomed in his hometown." And it's true. You know, you're always the young guy. You know, I was the youngest brother, and you don't get the respect. You know, you have great ideas, you think, until you share it with your family around the supper table, and you realize it's not such a great idea because everybody just trounces what you believe. So when I left at 24, it was one of the best things I ever did. I was on my own, and I had to kind of do my own thing. But he taught us so many great principles, just through life lessons. I'll tell you one in particular I think was really important. I was 12 years old, and my dad walked into my bedroom, and back then the big store that we shopped in wasn't Publix, but in Brooklyn it was Walmart's. And he put on my bed a grocery bag filled with $200,000 in 20s. And he said, "I need you to count this for me." So 4 hours later, I was completely soaking wet with sweat. I had the ink all over my shirt, my arms. I handed my dad the bag, and he said, "I think it's 200,000. He said it was. Years later, literally 15 years later, I was at Dunkin' Donuts with him in Sheepshead Bay. We were going to the city to have lunch, have dinner, and I said, "Dad, I'm going to ask you a question." I said, "Do you remember years ago He said, "Yeah." I said, "What was you never," and he did it twice actually. I said, "You never kind of explained if there was anything behind." He said, "Greg, I didn't have to explain." He said, "What I did to you that night was I removed the fear of money from your psychology." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Greg, most people, whether they have it or not, will never look at $5,000 in cash in front of them. And they'll always have this psychological block that I can't make $100,000 a month or a year or a week because they can't see it." And he said, "What I did for you, I allowed you to swim with $200,000 for hours." He said, "And that would remove the fear of money," and it did. Now, I wouldn't have known that, but I remember, you know, making $22,000 a year when I was 27 years old, and looking at a buddy who was making $250,000 a year, and I looked at him and I thought, "Gosh, if you can do it, I can do it, and I know what it looks like." And so it really did. It inspired me to go out and to do bigger things and not be afraid of money.
You know, you hit on the fear thing, and you and I chatted before. There may be some people in this room that have very good jobs and have very good ideas about what they'd like to do if they weren't in that very good job, but how do they quit that very good job to pursue that very good idea and just say, "Well, you know, I'm just going to give up this $60,000 a year job because I really want this entrepreneurial thing." Or they'll say, "Well, I'll do this and I'll do this halfway." You kind of got to go all in, don't you?
Not really. I mean, you know, how many in here feel like they're entrepreneurs? Okay, good bit of you. You know, it's whether it's business, sports, whatever it is, it comes from the same place. You know, you've got to be willing to take a chance in life. You got to be willing to risk. You know, I would say if you don't try, that's a greater risk than trying, because it'll lead you nowhere. I tell my kids all the time, do nothing and nothing will happen. Do something and something happens. So, you know, you know, whether it's now or down the road, I think, you know, you have to be willing to go after your dreams. And this all really roots into the soul, you know. Do you believe in what you believe? That's the bottom line. You know, I can only tell you, for me, even as a young boy, I always wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I try not to let obstacles, I mean, obstacles are there, but I didn't let them stop me. I would hurdle those obstacles. But at the same time, you know, if you're in a job and you say, I want to be an entrepreneur, we talked about this the other day, it's calculated risk. You know, if you look at my career, sometimes people say to me, Greg, you're reckless. I'm not reckless. It's actually the opposite. I'm very calculated in what I do. I research, I contemplate, I ask a lot of questions, I wait, I do very few, some of my team is here tonight, Julie and Bob, they'll tell they've been with me for years. I calculate, and I'm very patient too, to do what I want to do. Some of us, I want to do it, I got to do it now. Not necessarily. You know, do the, count the cost. Do your due diligence. Don't give up on your belief, but count the cost and calculate how to do it. So, you know, that would be my advice. It's what I do all the time. It takes me 9 months to lease a car, literally. And I hate to be gross or anything, I know where I'm going, but my bathroom is filled with brochures of the cars. And I mean, I will read, and when I walk into a car dealership, I walk in, I said, don't come near me. Don't come near me. I know more about the vehicle than you do. So you'll ruin the sale for yourself because you won't get it. Let me do my thing. And I walk in that dealership, and I know exactly what I want because I study it. And so I limit it down to 1 or 2 vehicles, and then the authenticity comes in. I walk in that dealership and I have to feel the vehicle.
What did you get?
Range Rover Sport. I've had that for 11 years. I keep rolling the lease into one. I just bought a Tesla a year and a half ago, but again, gosh, I studied the Tesla for so long. I even went back and studied Tesla himself, and I thought, I like this guy, man. I don't like that vehicle. So, you know what you're doing. You know why you're doing it. You know, because you got to hear a lot of stuff from people. Why you shouldn't do it. And you're going to hear things from people, a lot of times not even encouraging you to do it. You'll hear more discouragement. So you've got to really understand why you're doing what you're doing. I do. It's really hard to move me. The other thing I tell my kids, I say, listen to everyone in the world, everyone, but follow no one. You know, I always listen. I want to hear what everybody has to say, but it's not going to sway me. I'll take that information and I'll put it with the rest of the information, and it helps me process and ultimately make my own decision. So know why you're doing it. Understand that. Dig deep, but don't ever not live what your dream is. You know,
I know people have different backgrounds, different careers, and different things they've done, and different ideas they think they're really good at. I was talking to this gentleman right here about his business he's working on. He's telling me some things, and I'm going, well, that's very interesting. I'm going, I wonder what that means. You know, but what's interesting is your background is so diverse, from ministry to coffee to mutual equity fundraising and banking. I'm wondering if you could look a little bit back and just a quick recap, and what did you take from those different careers that made you into the entrepreneur you are today?
I've had about 8 different careers. I've been in 8 industries, including the ministry. So now I can say I've done it all. I actually got into the ministry because I had my first existential crisis at 5 years of age. And by 17, I was a disaster. So at 22, I decided to go out and get an education in theology. While I was doing that, I got a call from a church that said, we need a pastor, you want to do it? And I thought, well, give it a shot, why not? And that's another thing, the attitude of, why not? So I tried that for 9 years, and I really enjoyed that. It was really great. I loved helping people. You know, I loved to be a part of it. The problem I had as a minister was I knew nothing about God. I still don't. I mean, in reality, and I would say it in front of people. I think people, when you go to a church, want to hear the guy who's speaking or the woman to say, I really know. I used to say, I have no clue. So let's figure it out together. But I would do what I want to do. If I didn't want to become a minister, I wouldn't have been a minister. I left the church 9 years later because I don't want to offend anybody. I just felt that wasn't spirituality. You know, institutionalizing spirituality doesn't work, just like institutionalizing money in banks doesn't work, and institutionalizing anything doesn't work. So I realized I had to get out of that and move into something else. But everything that I've done in my life, I knew nothing about going into. I started at the bottom and everything, including Pulse. But that doesn't stop me. I always say the difference between one industry and another is vocabulary. That's all it is. You just got to learn the vocabulary because life is life. It really doesn't change much. You just got to know the terminology so you can communicate with the people there. So I must have learned an extra 2,000 words in my career because I've been in so many different industries. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed starting at the bottom and working my way to the top. And in every industry, I finished up at the top, and then I moved on. I was done. I wanted to try something different in my life. And everything, I always want to do something bigger. Not just to do bigger, but because to him who much is given, much is required. So after this amount of years and this amount of experience, I have a responsibility to take the next step up. Though I do want to be a barista again in a coffee shop. I almost took one downtown LA just as a joke. But
that was 2 Street Coffee, right?
Yeah, 2 Street Coffee was something I started in 2001. That was a little bit of a mistake, but I started that because I got pissed off at Starbucks in 1999. I was a big Starbucks fan. I love Howard Schultz. Has anybody ever read the book, Pour Your Heart Into It? I would tell you, if you're ever going to read a book, read Howard Schultz's first book, Pour Your Heart Into It. It's an amazing story. He grew up 3 miles away from me in Brooklyn. He's 10 years older than I am, but I respect him more than probably anybody in the face of the earth today. His passion, his belief in what he's accomplished, and what drives him is more important to me than the success. He's successful because of what drives him. But I got pissed off in '99 because I had left the church, and I actually got fired from the church in '99, and a few hundred people followed me, so I started a church because they were following me, but I didn't want to be paid, because I wanted to break from that, political, financial box. So I loved coffee, so I was meeting in Starbucks with people, and that's how I was casting the vision for the church, and I was dropping $45 a day on coffee in my meetings. And at that time, Starbucks was opening up 2 new shops a day. They were really in a growth pattern. And the quality was going down because they couldn't keep up. So I thought, this really sucks. I'm going to do this myself. So while starting a church, I kind of moved to Seattle, and I worked with 2 great independent coffee guys, Cafe Vita and Cafe Vivace. And I spent 4 months starting the bottom, steaming milk, pulling shots, learning the art and the science of coffee. If you're going to do something, do it so you know why you're doing it, and you can be the best at it. Not to beat anybody. I always say I never try to beat anybody in this world. I just try to be the best that I can at what I'm doing, because that's the only one I'm competing against is me. And I left Seattle, and I went to Fort Lauderdale, and I opened up down in Himmershey by the Broward Performing Arts Center. And I picked this crazy location in an alleyway, 40 feet away from Tarpon Bend, which I'm going to write a book. It's going to say 40 feet from success. That's how I missed it, 40 feet, because nobody knew I was there. But I was on a railroad track, I was in an alley, and we were successful. We were open for 13 years. I mean, I got the hell out in 3, but we were open for 13 years. I started the franchise then, and I was the first guy to bring in wireless internet. I made the cover of M Business magazine in 2001. The cover headline said, "He beats Starbucks." And so I won. It was the only way I won. They put me out of business other than that. They opened 25 of them in 2 miles of my shop. But the key to competing with them was franchising, so I kept opening them up, 3 miles apart. I lost everything I put into them. Didn't make one dime in that coffee shop. I lost over $250,000 in that endeavor. So, by the way, if you want to go out there and do something, get prepared to lose your money, because you're going to lose. I was actually working for tips. That's how bad it got. I was doing 15-hour shifts. I was doing great because I can talk, so people loved you. I was making $200 a day in tips. But that's how I got into coffee. And we were on television. I was on talk shows. I was in magazines. We were voted best espresso. And by the way, we educated our clients on why we were so good. We told them why. We believed in what we were doing. We were passionate about what we were doing. I mean, if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. That's the greatest advice I can give anybody. Do what you really want to do, and you'll be successful. might not make money, but you'll be successful at it. So that's how I got into coffee.
And from there, Washington Mutual,
Yeah.
what happened there? And then help me on this. Did you get into actual equity fundraising with Washington Mutual or afterwards?
You know, 2002, 2003 was a really bad year for me. I had 2 young kids, 5 and 6. And by the way, we funded the coffee shops with my money and my friends. So, everything I've done, I funded it with friends and family's money. I don't have any friends and family anymore, but that's why I'm going to be on that Tesla ship in 2022 to Mars. I got to Washington Mutual because in 2002, 2003 was really very difficult for me. I basically went broke. I went down to almost broke. I had $47 in my checking account with a 5 and a 6-year-old. And it was really difficult. So I remember going home at nights and opening the refrigerator and there was milk. And I go, there's milk, man. Yeah, good shape, we have milk. And tough though, really tough. And I had to go in every day and make the coffee. And I hated it. Matter of fact, when my alarm rang at 5 in the morning, my foot didn't even hit the floor and I was shaking my head like, I cannot believe I gotta do this again. So it was a really, really dark, it was a very dark time for me. It was difficult. And it was like everything just blew up on me. And so this minister that I knew him for years, who wasn't a minister at the time, he was a Formula One race car driver that decided to go into ministry. And and he really sucked at the ministry. But it did. Horrible communicator, So he knew me when I was in Boca Community, and I was very radical, as you can imagine. I was a radical pastor. I didn't abide by, quote unquote, the rules. It was just about helping people. Do whatever you got to do to help people. So anyway, came down and visited me in my coffee shop, and he said, I need help. He said, would you be willing to come into my church and help me grow this church? And I said, Dave, you can't handle it. He said, no, I know I can. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, I need a job really quick because I don't have health insurance. I wouldn't tell him this, but I'm thinking, so I was just playing, I'm not interested, I'm not going to go. And I really didn't want to go back into the church. But he came in almost every other day, and he just kept persuading me, and I thought, you know what, I got to get the heck out of this coffee shop. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. He paid me $60,000 a year. He gave me all health insurance, so I thought, great, I get my kids all situated. And I lasted 5 months, and he couldn't handle it. So I was done, 2003, but my kids got their teeth taken care of, they got their checkups, and I had money in the bank. So I started to read the Da Vinci Code, because that's the book that came out that year. And I got a phone call from my brother. He said, hey, what are you doing? I said, nothing. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I've got a clue in the world. By the way, just get used to that ambiguity. There's nothing wrong with it, man. Not having a clue what you're going to do, please, I don't care what your parents say or anything. That's the best position to be in, is not knowing. Trust me. So I said, I have no idea. I have no idea what to do. He said, hey, why don't you come work at Washington Mutual with me? He said, I'm doing great there. And I said, I don't want to be a banker. And he said, well, you'll be great. I said, what can I do? I don't like to do banking. I said, what do you got? He says, yeah. He says, loan consultant. So I entertained it after about a month of dialogue. And so he got me an interview at Washington Mutual. And meanwhile, to work at Washington Mutual, they were the #1 premier bank in the country at the time. You had to have 2 years experience, which I did not have. You had to fund at least $1 million a month in residential lending. I had no idea what a margin was in those days. So I interviewed, the woman that I interviewed with was a Lutheran. And she managed 2 of the top producing offices in the country outside of California in Boca Raton. And she loved me because I had that pastoral background. But I got vetoed. Every time she pushed the resume, they vetoed me for the job. It took 3 months. So she called me one day. She said, and I didn't know what was going on, but they kept telling her, we're not hiring a coffee shop minister. This is Washington Mutual. So my severance pay from the church was running down anyway. But so she finally called me. This was February of 2004. And she said, Greg, would you be willing to drive up to Jensen Beach and meet with the president of Washington Mutual? I said, sure. Now, little did I know, she took it so high up the ladder because she saw something in me. Like she really understood people. She had a really great feeling that I would really do well. And so she said to the president, because she had such a high-performing two offices in Boca, that he was willing to at least, she said, meet him. And if you deny him, I'll drop it. I'll never bring it up again. I didn't know that was, had no idea that was a conversation. So I drove up to Jensen Beach. It was one of the only times I wore a suit. And I sat in this guy's office. It was no more than, 35 seconds. He looked at my resume, and he probably glanced at it moments before I came in. And this is what he said to me. He said, Greg, he said, his name was Jack Light. He was about 67 years old. He said, Greg, he said, you got a great resume here. I really like it. I said, thank you. I sat down, and he says, man, he says, you started a youth group with 3 kids. You ended up with 1,000 kids in your high school ministry, 27 high schools. That's really cool. Then you started a church, and you grew that. He said, then you started a coffee shop, and he said, you're really good. You're really good. He said, so my suggestion to you is go do what you're good. Go do what you're good at. I looked at him and I thought, Jack, you're probably right. So I started to get up, humbled, and he said, he's right. What am I doing? I started to get up, and then he said something. He said, and anyway, what in the world ever made you think you can do this? So as I got up, I sat back down in my chair, and I looked at him. And by the way, don't let anybody ever push you around. You know what I'm saying? Don't let anybody push you around in this world. And I looked at him and I said, because you told me I can do this. But he said, me? I said, you. You told me I can do this. Matter of fact, you told me I'd be damn good at this. He said, I said, yeah, you did. You looked at my resume, and what did you say, Jack? You said I was really good at what I did. I said, do you know what I did? I sold something that you couldn't see, you couldn't touch, and you didn't get it till you dropped dead. God. A mortgage? It's tangible. I can sell it better than you or anybody in your company. He looked at me, he sat back in his chair, folded his arms, and he said this, you're hired. That's how I got into Washington Mutual. 13 months later, I was in Hawaii at the President's Club. I funded $87 million in residential lending. I went on to fund $200 million a year in residential lending. The office that I interviewed in, within 15 months was my office, and I had my entire team in that office. I had 3 assistants. Don't let anybody push you around. You can do anything in this world. Just learn the vocabulary. My bathroom, by the way, when I was hired by Washington Mutual, had all kinds of mortgage stuff on the floor, and I studied it, and I understood it, but I never sold a mortgage. I wasn't a mortgage guy, guys. I sold a concept to people. You see, as I sat with people who wanted a mortgage, who wanted to refinance their house, I would look at their applications, and the guy would make he'd be making $300,000 a year, have $150,000 in his savings account, $75,000 in his 401k, and I look at it, and he was 48 years old. I'm thinking, what the hell's the plan here? You got a problem. And meanwhile, his house was worth $750,000, and he owed $100 on it. So he was sitting on $650,000 of money that was retired, and he was going to struggle to retire. So I started to educate people. That's what I do, educate on, you better make a change here. Money makes money, and you're sitting on it, and you're working for it. By the way, there's 2 ways you make money in this world. My dad taught me. You work for it, and it works for you. And most people will always choose to work for the dollar rather than having the dollar work for them. So I became a guy sitting behind a desk that wasn't selling mortgages. I was selling a concept. And people were beginning to understand this and go, it makes sense. And it didn't matter about the mortgage anymore. It was a relationship I built. The people that did what I suggested they consider doing when the real estate markets collapsed, remember that, in 2007? And the economy imploded, guess what these people had done? They had put the bank's money into their homes and took their money out of their homes. And guess who wins at the end of the day? He who has money. And so they had the cash. And the bank was at risk because whose money was in the house that was imploding? The bank. So the bank was negotiable with those people. So I made 1,000 great friends in 2007 because I took the time to communicate a concept that nobody was willing to communicate at the time.
Okay, now, those are great stories. One question always goes in my mind, and I don't know if it goes through these people's minds too. Is an entrepreneur born with those traits, or needs to develop them along the way, or is it a combination of both?
That's a great question. You know,
I mean, to me, and excuse the ladies here, I think you were born and the biggest part of your body wasn't the upper part, you know, if you get my drift. I mean, you have some courage. I don't know what the other words are. But so how does that translate? In other words, I've heard all these things from you about everything you've done through there. All these people in the audience, they got to know, like, well, was I born with this, or do I develop this, or does this class give it to me, or what? I mean, shed a little light on that part.
you know, listen, my path is my path, you know, and it's really, it's mine. It's, you know, you can't mimic my, don't try to mimic my path, you know, you want to mimic, you want to do your path. I think everybody's born with this. You're born with a dream or dreams. You're born with a certain design of skill sets. And your life, your whole life, as mine, is about bringing those things out and doing them. Whether you're an entrepreneur or you do garbage. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing garbage. Remember that. I mean, it's what you want to do. It's what you enjoy doing. So, you know, I think we all, let me say this, they're not all born with being brave. Okay, it's taken. I'm as scared as anybody else in this world when I'm doing things like this or anything that I just mentioned to you. I'm scared to death. You know, when I signed the lease, personally guaranteeing the lease in Fort Lauderdale for that coffee shop, I was scared to death, but I did it. I had to muster up courage. You're not born with that. You have to learn how to develop courage. What's the movie, Braveheart? You know, it's not brave unless you're afraid. So I don't know if we're all entrepreneurs, but we're all born with a fire in us to do something. And the only difference at the end of the day is, are you doing what you're born to do or not? And that requires courage and being brave. Now, let's talk about entrepreneurs for a second. I think in some way, shape, or form, many of us have a desire to be an entrepreneur, but there's levels of being an entrepreneur. This is what I've learned in 51 years. I would classify myself as a number 1, number 2 entrepreneur, which means I can lead and start a company and get others to follow and be a part of what I'm doing. So that's a number 1 type entrepreneur. But then I also, over the years, I started to feel really comfortable as a number 2 entrepreneur, which means getting behind another entrepreneur who's a number 1 and helping him achieve his vision. I can really believe in what he was doing. I liked what he was doing. I wanted to be part of that. So there's a number 1 and number 2 type entrepreneur. They're very similar characteristics as mine. But then there's number 3, 4, and 5 entrepreneurs. Jules is probably, she's a mom of 4 children. And when I met her, her youngest was 2. So she had a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and she was divorced. And she sat with, at that point I was a number 2 entrepreneur. She sat with me and she jumped on board as an entrepreneur, but she wasn't leading, but she had just as much risk, but we umbrellaed some of that because we were in the front. So she really was moved by being part of something that had that. Bob is an entrepreneur too. He's probably a 3 or 4 type entrepreneur. Could be a 2, I don't know. I don't want to insult you. Maybe you're a 10, I don't know. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're opposing for all I know. But, so, you know, figuring out your spot, you know, what moves you. You might get approached by some entrepreneur that's doing something really big, like Rich, who's got a great project. Rich, right? He's got a great project, you've got a visionary, and you get behind him. And so there's all levels, I think, Dave, that, you know, I was telling Dave earlier, I've been a number 2 entrepreneur probably for the past, I don't know, 12 years or so. And recently I started to feel that number 1 urge again to go out and launch something else on my own. So it all depends, I think.
And I think that's a good point, because a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs and maybe haven't made that step can now say, okay, I can go in helping someone with my skill set, and then that itch is going to come along where you want to be that lead entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And now you left Washington Mutual, and you got. How did you get involved in the? Is it the Hollywood scene or executive producer? I mean, we see that, you know, going back to Danny Tom, executive producer Sheldon Leonard. I'm going back way back, or different names up there, and you're going, or somebody who stars in a project, and you're the executive producer. You didn't know beans about the film industry, did you?
Nothing. I got into Hollywood when I ended up buying a home in Park City, Utah, as a second home, and I was doing a lot of mountain biking and skiing. But and the way I designed my life, you know, I didn't want to live in one location. I can work from anywhere in the world. So work where you enjoy, you know. So I love mountain biking and skiing and snowboarding. So you kind of go where you want to go and do what you do. While I was in Park City, I met a lot of producers and actors and directors, and I was teaching them the same thing I was teaching others about leveraging your property, and you know, and it got me into Hollywood. So I started to work with producers and directors and actors who, you know, aren't necessarily business people, and they started to learn these business principles. And I had a good reputation. So I got a call out of nowhere in 2007 by a CEO of a small independent production company. And he said, hey, he said, I want to talk to you about this idea I have. He said, I'm doing the sequel to The Wizard of Oz in animation. I said, great. I said, I'm not interested. And he said, well, I didn't even get to I said, I'm not interested. I said, nobody makes money in movies. I said, so I'm not interested. So I hung up. This guy, Dave, called me back every single day. He was tenacious. By the way, keyword, tenacious. That's huge. Don't stop. He called every day. And so I said, send me your PPM. And he did, and I gave it to my brother. I said, can you read that for me? And so he came back, he said, look, I know nothing about animation. He said, but this is a pretty good deal. He said, it's an intellectual property deal. Now, if you know anything about Hollywood, it's never IPs, intellectual properties. It's always, you invest in a film, if you make some money, you get it. But in this, it was interesting because it was an IP deal, which means we would own the rights to the characters, to the stories, and they bought 10 books from the great-grandson of the author of The Wizard of Oz. His name is Roger Baum, who's the great-grandson. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz. This was his great-grandson who owned these books. They bought the books, and I thought, this is really interesting. And I thought, man, The Wizard of Oz, it's like the #5, #2 movie of all time. And I'm thinking, never been an animation film about it, you know, in theaters. But this is interesting. Then I studied, so what did I do? So I said, okay, I started to call him every day and ask him a ton of questions. We put him on the ropes and ask him, and he'd answer these questions. Then I was reading, and then I was calling my friends in Hollywood. One of my good friends was John Nagowski. He was the president of CBS Television. I said, John, I got this deal. What can you tell me about it? He said, I don't know much about film, but... So I did 7 months of due diligence, and this is what I came out with. I thought, when you look at the animation industry, it's one of the most profitable industries on the planet. I don't know if you knew that. Hugely profitable. Rarely, if ever, does an animation franchise fail. And what I mean by franchise, it's not about a movie in animation. It's about the hundreds or even thousands of other revenue streams that you have in that film that make money because of the film. Dolls, toys, games, candy, etc. Games, digital games. So I looked at this and I thought, this is really interesting. It's an IP deal. So at the time, it was a $20 million project. And then I got involved. After 7 months, I said, I'll do it. I said, but here's the deal. I said, I might have this correct. You might have to correct me, but I remember saying to the CEO, I said, I'll get involved, but don't ever tell me what to do when I don't work for you. And he said, but I'm the CEO. I said, yeah. I said, but you haven't done anything as a production company in 15 years worth talking about, so I'm not getting in your boat. I said, so if we're going to do this, I said, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to analyze this, and I'm going to help you lead this. And so he agreed. And that was I said that humbly. It wasn't an arrogant statement. It was, dude, you haven't succeeded in 15 years. This is a great idea, but it's going to need some. So I came into the project, and we ended up pulling off a miracle. We raised over $120 million for the franchise all retail money, no institutional dollars. We had a wide release, 4,000 screens, which is unheard of, without any studio participation. We had 3,600 revenue streams. Some of the largest companies in the world backed us. Sony, Bandai Toy Company, etc. And we spent $32 million on prints and advertising, which is your key to marketing your film, which is a huge budget. We were wide release, and we put in $17.5 million of the 32 ourselves. So we funded almost 90% of the entire franchise, and it failed. It failed. And it failed not because we didn't execute. It failed not because the CEO was, it failed because the last piece of our puzzle was distribution. And we signed with a company that sucked. Who? Clarios. CEO is Bill Sadler. And we put it, everything we built, it took 10 years, by the way. They started this in 2005. It took almost 9 years, actually. It took 9 years to do this. And we had it to the highest point in the industry. We were the #1 anticipated film for box office. The problem was nobody knew when the movie was coming out. And we're in a lawsuit now with Clarios because it's believed there's potentially even criminal what was done with our money, because we're independent. Money was spent. Nobody knew when the movie was coming out. We did $3 million the opening weekend. We should have done 4,000 screens, $32 million P&A. We should have done at least $20 million in the opening weekend and went on to have done 60 to 70 million. If we would have did 15 million the opening weekend, we would have been a success. We did 8 million total in domestic box office. It was a global release, by the way. But all the international distributors, after we bombed, they pulled back their theaters on us. Guys, I will tell you, okay, this is important to understand. One of the hardest elements of my life was on May 9th of 2014. I would have rather failed in 2011 or 2012 when we thought we could have, because we had so much further to go. But to get it to that point, have 4,000 screens and then to crumble, for me, to this day, I think there's I've lost a part of me that I don't know if I'll ever get back. I was talking to my brother, every one of my siblings was we raised $122 million. There's not a Starbucks I can go in Park City, LA, or Florida that I don't see an investor on a daily basis. So now I go to Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah. No, but now, you bring up the great point. And maybe a year ago, we would have skipped over this topic. And we talked about this on the phone. And you said, that's a topic I want to talk about, because to be an entrepreneur, what do you learn from this and where do you go forward from it? Or is it too close?
Well, the greatest success of my life was launching the franchise, and it was the greatest failure of my life at the same time. But the greatest success of my life was getting up again. And I will tell you, I get up every day, 7:15. I'm in the gym for 2 hours, 5 days a week. I couldn't get out of bed, period, for 3 months. I'd get up in the morning and would open my eyes and just wished I was dead. It's bad. When you fail, it hurts, guys. It's bad. So for me, the greatest success is where I am today, that I got back up. And I'll quote one of the great proverbs in the universe. It's written by a man named King Solomon, one of the wealthiest and wisest men, they say, who ever lived. He wrote a proverb that I knew very well. It said this. He said, the righteous will fall 7 times, and the wicked will fall once. And I've known that for years. And the point of that whole proverb is that when you fall, you got to get back up and try again. And if you don't, that's considered wicked. We were taught right in church, don't drink, don't have sex till you're married, don't gamble. No. You want to know what sums it all up? When you fall, get back up. Get back up. And for me, in the summer of 2014, when guys, I want to tell you, I never thought I would succeed at anything again. I never thought I'd be able to get up and try something again. It was horrible. It was the most difficult point of my entire life, my career. I hated myself at times, and I did nothing wrong. You know, we over-delivered everything we ever promised investors, and they all agreed. But it was hard to live with yourself because it was such a catastrophic failure when it should have been some type of success. So the biggest lesson for me to date was I had to get right back up. Slowly, but I did. And even today, I may have been pushing it if I say I'm 60% who I was and getting better. Today I was telling my brother, we were joking, I said, you're in a wheelchair, at least I'm on crutches. You know, because it devastates everybody who was involved. You know, lives are ruined. You know, when you go to the production company today, it's devastating. They have all their eggs in that basket. So that's, you know, I'm not embarrassed to talk about it. You know, I think it's more important to talk about our failures sometimes than our successes. And I've said this, my team will tell you, I've said this to my kids, I say it to people, I probably have failed 75% of the time in my life. But nobody remembers those things. They remember the 25% of the successes you have. It's just how life goes. You're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes, just not for $122 million. I mean, that's a big failure. I mean, that's a lot of people. And my whole goal there was to change those investors' lives, because if this thing worked, it would have paid out their great-grandkids. Generations of pigs. That's how the animation industry works. So, you know, that was very difficult for me.
Now, of all the investors that you've spoken to that were involved in this project, let's say you get another project on, and I'm sure you're working on several stuff that we'll talk about. How do you approach those people? Or do you?
Yeah, you know, we're all friends, believe it or not. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of investors. Think about it, 9 years, $122 million. You know, we didn't do it with $20 million investors, 100,000, 250,000, occasional $1 million investor. You know, we were walking down Delray a few weeks ago, and I saw one of my larger investors for about $2 million. He was having dinner, he got up, hugged me, how you do, you know. Here's the key, you know, be honest with people. Building that project, I think I said this to you earlier, my line to every investor, I said, was, this is one of the greatest opportunities you'll ever see in your entire life. And I wasn't kidding, because has anybody ever got a call from Pixar or Disney to invest in one of their animation films? No, you never will. They don't fund it through people. They don't need to. So I said, this is the greatest opportunity you'll ever see in your entire life, but you'll lose every dime you give me. That's what I told every single investor. And they said, what'd you say? I said, you're going to lose all your money. They said, you raising money? I said, I am. There's a hell of a way to raise money. I said, it's the truth. They said, then why should I give it to you? I said, just in case we pull it off. Because if we pull this off, it'll pay generations. So, invest in me, because I don't have a project yet. Invest in me, and they did. And up until the last 2 months, right? The last 2 months was the only time I got emotionally excited about the film and the franchise was in March of 2014, because it was getting amazing reviews. It was getting amazing results. So I was very honest with these people, right up to the very end. I put a tremendous amount of my own money into it, by the way. Hey, let me tell you something else too. Whenever you work with people, at least for me, if somebody asks you to put money into something that they're doing and they don't have any money in it, run. Run. I'm sorry, man. It's everything that I do, I put money into. Because I hate to use it. I mean, I'm not quoting the Bible, so I'm just giving you some things that popped in my head. I do have a theology degree, but a lot of that stuff that Jesus said, I got to tell you guys, was true. It just gets really messed up in those buildings, man. But he said this. He said, where your treasure is, so is your heart. Remember that. Where your treasure is, so is your heart. If somebody doesn't have any money in something, they ain't got any heart in it. Remember that. And then, you know, you have money in it, you're going to work hard. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed. You're going to work hard. So, lots of money in it, but the investors understood. We made history in Hollywood. I mean, we're heroes in Hollywood. I mean, the industry will tell you it's never been done in the history of Hollywood. An independent production company in the animation space, 122 million, wide release, we own everything in the franchise, including the music. You know the cast, right? Leah Michele, Patrick Stewart, Megan Hilty, Jim Belushi, Danny Aykroyd, Martin Short, Bernadette Peters, Oliver Platt, Kelsey Grammer. I mean, a cast in this film. Sony did all the music for us.
Okay, where do you go from here? And
Pulse.
tell us about it.
There's a concept called falling forward. Have you heard about it? If you can fall forward when you fail, man, you're in good shape. Digital Domain, have you heard of Digital Domain? Digital Domain it's a special effects company. It was owned by James Cameron. John Textor, have you heard of John Textor? He's all over the news all the time. Textor bought Digital Domain from Cameron and owned it. And it's a special effects company. Digital has done amazing special effects for some of the greatest movies of all time. Tex is an amazing visionary. He's a great leader. He has a great career in doing big things. I didn't know John didn't know me, but the people in the animation industry in between us knew the both of us. Texter started an animation studio, wanted to do animation, now featured animation. And so he started something called Tradition Studios in Port St. Lucie. And he was taking, I think he took 300 Hollywood animators and directors from LA to Port St. Lucie. And have you been there to Port St. Lucie?
Yeah. Got a nice golf course there. That's about it.
You know, you're not stopping for gas on the way up to Disney. You're not stopping for Starbucks in Port St. Lucie. You're just zipping right past Port St. Lucie as quick as you can. This crazy guy launches an animation studio and gets 300 Hollywood people to come out, and he gets grants from the city for, I think, $40 million. He gets Abu Dhabi to give him $100 million. I mean, the guy's really great. The long and short of it was, he got shorted. He went public with the company, and I won't go through the story, but it ends up the stock gets shorted by a predatory lender. It goes under. This guy is a disaster. He calls me in 2012, and he says, "Can you talk to me? Can you meet me?" I said, "Yeah." So I drove up. And that's another thing. I just touch on this. Be generous with your time. You know, I'll talk to anyone. I really will. Not just John Texas. I'll talk to anyone. I get LinkedIn messages from writers that just want to. They'll meet me in LA. I'll spend an hour with them. Be generous with your time. You know, it's a tough world out there. It really is. And none of us were born with instructions, right? You don't rip these instructions. No one knows how to do this thing called life, right? So I think we have a responsibility to each other that as we start to do things that work, share it with others. So it's part of my life. I'm very generous with my time, no matter who you are. So I went up and I met Texter, and at this point, remember, it's 2012. My project is really roaring. It's doing great. He's on his way down, and he says, "Can you help me?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "What do you want?" He says, I can save the studio." He says, "The money that you raise for this project that's come in," he says, "I have a studio." And I said, he said, "Greg, if I met you in 07 and you did this for me," he said, "Well, I wouldn't be in this position." I said, "Because I don't believe in institutional dollars." So I looked at him and I said, "John, the truth of the matter is this. The building is falling on me. And I can't get next to you and let it land on me because I'll sacrifice my project. I can't." I said, "But I promise you, once it falls on you, I'll come back and help dig you out." And we became friends that day, 2012. And he went through hell for the next 15 months. And I was right there with him. He's not the kind of guy, he doesn't go to the gym, but he would drive down from Jupiter Island and meet me in Boca and go to the gym with me. Because that's where I was going to spend time with him. Matter of fact, the funny story was, he'd be on the curling machine and he talks so much, you know, so he'd be looking at me and he'd be doing, you know, like this, and he wouldn't stop, he'd just keep doing it. It's like, "You might want to switch arms." And he'd switch, he did like 200 reps in each arm. He couldn't brush his teeth, he told me, for a week. Couldn't move his body. True story, I mean it. And then one day we were standing up overlooking the basketball court, and we were talking, and he was really being down. And I said, "John, listen to me, man." And you shared the vision a week earlier about Pulse. And this was his idea. Let me go back. A week earlier, he sat me down, we had dinner, and he said, "Here's my idea." He says, "I want to take the good of the special effects industry, and I want to leave the bad." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Greg," he said, "nobody does human animation. You know, you're making a Transformer one day, and then you're making a human for The Hobbit, and then you're making a Ninja Turtle and a shark for Spielberg, but no one ever really focuses on human animation." He says, "I believe I can assemble my team and we will be the world leaders in human animation." And he says, "And I believe it's the future, artificial intelligence." So I started listening to him. And I knew nothing about special effects, nothing about human animation. But you don't have to, right? It's an opportunity. I always say, opportunities never cease to present themselves. It's when you close, you miss opportunities. They come always. So I said to him, wow, so now I know nothing about it, now I gotta get busy learning about it. So he said, I want you to help me launch the company. And so long story short, I agreed to launch the company with him. And there was him, me, and Renee. And we launched the company in his backyard. Actually, 4 of us, there was his dog that was always present. We had no money. I said he had no money. And we needed about $4 million because his idea was to do Michael Jackson. So I said, all right. I said, what's next? He said, we got to go to the estate, the Michael Jackson estate. I said, okay. I said, we don't have a company. He said, I know. We went to the Michael Jackson estate, and we sold it. We got the deal. 3 of us and a dog. We walked out of the estate, and we were going to make digital Michael Jackson. And holograms, by the way, there's no such thing as a hologram. Just so you know, we don't do holograms. We don't project. We hire companies to project. We create digital humans, photorealistic humans. And I'm going to show you one in a second. But you can't film it. You got to keep your cell phones off. I mean, literally, because I'll go to jail. But we make humans, digital humans. And our studios in San Francisco. We have 50 employees, the best in the world of human animation. But we got our first deal with the Michael Jackson estate, and then we went to Zurich. I wasn't going to go to my investor base yet. We went to Zurich and we raised $4 million, some strong family money, not my, but Zurich money. We ended up raising $15 million out of Europe, and we were off. We got a deal to do the Billboard Awards. How many of you guys saw Michael Jackson's digital Billboard Award performance, right? So you notice the camera at the billboards, we couldn't do any close-ups because he wasn't ready for a close-up because we got the deal in October, and then by January the billboards came up on May 18th, and we had a very short window to create Digital Michael. So we really, the job we did on it was good from the distance, but that was the extent of it. And that launched us. Now here's the key of the company. You ready for this? This is what I love about Falling Forward, the opportunity. I'm a big intellectual property guy, so I always believe if you're going to do something, own it, right? So if you work for Disney, right? If Disney hires a special effects company, they say, hey, can you make a Ninja Turtle for us? Yeah, we don't own the Ninja Turtle, right? Disney does, and they make all the money. Our company has a different philosophy. We will not create, and there's a shortage of human animators, so we will not make the character unless we own it. So we own 40% of Michael Jackson. Digital Michael Jackson, in perpetuity. So, and by the way, Michael's dead. The only one alive is the one we have. And he's going to go to work beginning next year. And he's going to work for a long, long time. And we're 40% owners of that Michael Jackson. See, keep learning as you get older. Second thing what happened after Michael Jackson was the Elvis estate called us and said, oh my gosh. Now the Elvis estate, they just want to make money on Elvis. This Michael Jackson estate, very different. They're really cautious. So we own 50% of Elvis Presley now, moving forward in perpetuity. We own 50% of Marilyn Monroe. So the concept for us is we're going to bring back not just deceased or late celebrities. That's just the beginning. That's to get the attention of the world. So we're not into the let's bring back the dead concept. No, we're going to bring back the 3 top dead celebrities of all time. And we're going to play in the entertainment space because it's the lowest hanging fruit right now for us as a company. So, and I'll tell you what's going on there in a minute. So we start with that, but now it breeds into other areas of human animation, surgical, military. So as we become better and better at what we're doing, we have no competition because the only way you get better at human animation is by doing it. See, the key is when Lucas did human animation, the problem was next they were doing something else. And then when they had to do another human, they brought a different team on, so there was no recorded succession of what they were doing. There's no history.
How does it apply to surgical?
Surgical. if you look at what they're using today in surgical simulation, the tools they have are great, but the content is horrendous. It's what I had when I was in elementary school, cartoons. If I show you Ben Button, how many saw the movie Benjamin Button? Curious Case, all right. Our team did that. By the way, the first 52 minutes of that film was not Brad Pitt. That was a digitally human animated head. It was not Brad Pitt. It wasn't us making Brad Pitt. It had nothing. It was created, and it performed like it's artificial intelligence. It performed like Brad Pitt. We had Brad for 3 days, and Brad for 3 days coated his face with green. They took 20 images of his face, and then the computer technology learned Brad Pitt and performed him in Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I had a video. I can show you that later if you want to stick around. Show you how it was made. His eyes, his skin, his beard, his meniscus fluid. These are all things. You see, the problem with human animation was up until Benjamin Button, it was eerie. They couldn't get it right. It was called the holy grail of human animation. There was this huge chasm. They just couldn't get it right. Your eye picks up things. You can tell when something's not real. You can't anymore. So for us, it was all about this IP play. As far as surgical, we have Ben's eye. I have Michael's eyes. I have body parts. I hate to be this, but you can now operate with a digital human, and you can make the mistake, A, or go to B. So we're content builders. You know, we don't take any credit for all the lawsuit you heard about with USA Hologram. There's no lawsuit. We're not in the projection business. We hire projection companies. So that's kind of what we do. Let me show you real quick. Now, please, no photos, no camera, no, you can't really, because I'll come back from the Billboard Awards. We couldn't do that. We wasn't ready. This is 10 months later. You can see when I say you get better at what you're doing, that's 10 months. Now you should see Elvis. And by the way, we shot Michael in 8K. ABC put it through 720. So if I showed you what we actually do, if you were present at the Billboard Awards, from 10 feet away, you couldn't tell.
We shot the projection at 8K? It
was 8K. And that was
you were projecting at 8K.
8K. That was the first time in history, and we brought camera guys in 2 months before. That I have actually this great.
Was it 2 4K stacked?
That's right. It was a stack. It was a stack, but the problem was the 44-foot stage. So again, you saw Tupac, right?
Yeah.
Texas did Tupac. Now Tupac launched this whole human animation thing. This is why. When Texas did Tupac, it was because Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre came in and said, "This is what we want to do. Can it be done?" And Texas said, "Yeah, we can do this." And he did it. He went to China when they launched Tupac at Coachella. It was no big deal until his album went up 1,000% in sales because of Coachella. All of a sudden now, the estate started to realize we can monetize through this. That's when Texas got serious about human animation, because you realize get very, very serious. So that what you saw there, we're now shooting, believe it or not, and I can't give you any other information on this, but it's going to go higher than 8K now.
Yeah.
12. That's right.
Yeah.
So what we can achieve now is absolutely sensational as you begin to look at the scope of technology. We have proprietary, and by the way, creating a human, there's no need to even patent it, because it changes every month. By the time your patent comes through, it's obsolete. You stay ahead of your competition by being better than them and by doing it consistently. We're way ahead of them. We're about 3.5 years ahead of anybody that's going to try to do this right now. But again, my play in this, I just came back from Tokyo. I spent 3 days in Tokyo meeting with Sony. You know, my goal is sell it for $2 billion. I don't care about human animation. Let's build a company. Let's splash it up. Let's sell the company. We took it public in a year. So we're a public company. Nobody knows we're public. We haven't announced it. But we took it public. And you know, the goal for us was, we went public because we didn't have a lot of capital, right? But we acquired companies with stock. So we used it to leverage, so we can go ahead, and when we find technologies that we want, we can buy them with our stock. So yeah, so that's Michael. You can see the difference. If I took you out to San Francisco and I walked you through the studio, you'd see Elvis, you'd meet Marilyn, and of course you'd see Michael. So the key for us is you know, and there's so many different ways to monetize, by the way. It's really, we get more phone calls. We say no probably 50 times a week to companies that call with ideas because we only look for the best ideas to do it. LeBron James will call. He'll say, I heard you guys are the best in human animation. I want you to make my digital likeness. And he doesn't know how valuable it is yet. And then when EA Sports calls, LeBron says, we want to do the best. He said call Pulse. They have my digital likeness. nobody does it better than them. You have a real LeBron. We have a technology, by the way. I didn't mean to get too.
No, keep going.
We have a technology. And Will, I don't know how much time I have. You said till 10, right? We have a technology.
Is that PM or AM?
We were burning $1.1 million a month, startup. Okay, think about startup company burning $1.1 million a month, right? It's stressful. That's why I went gray this year. It's stressful. But spending that $1.1 million, you have the greatest minds in the digital space in the world in one location. By the way, our studio is the old Lucas studio where they did Star Wars, Indiana Jones, so it's a museum. It's where Pixar was formed. The old office, the old studio. We have a technology today that we think is going to revolutionize the entire animation industry and what we're doing. So for instance, we're doing an Elvis show and a Michael Jackson show. It's not going to be a concert, it's going to be like Jersey Boys. But this time Michael will be in the show. There'll be a certain age, we can age him up, age him down, same thing with Elvis. That'll be probably in Vegas or Broadway, and probably in Asia. Michael will probably start in Tokyo.
Are you going to stick to the hologram projector thing, or is it going to be like just like a record animated film?
It'll be hologram. Now I use the term hologram. There's no such thing as a hologram yet, but it'll be projection. We are looking though. Hologram technology, true hologram technology, is getting close. Yeah. So we could be there in 18 months. Not us, but there are companies, and we look to acquire those companies that could have the technology.
Oh, you are looking to invest in that side as well?
We
okay.
buy these, yeah. Okay. That's why we have to stop. We want to acquire. Right. So yeah, great question. But it'll be more like a Jersey Boy. So it'll be story-driven, same thing with Elvis, etc. But here's what's interesting. We've got the digital human to act and to move, to dance, to speak. But we have a technology now that works in real time. It's cool. We have facial targeting technology that, in real time, this is what I mean. You bet on if this use a movie like animation film just came out recently, Legends of Oz. Leah Michelle goes in to do a voiceover, right? And I was there. She did a voiceover. The animators sit there. She does it. They record it. They go back to the studio. 4 months later, they have Dorothy with Leah Michelle's characteristics. We have camera technology today that could actually film Leah Michelle and in real time convert it right to the character on the screen in real time, fully rigged. That's an advancement. It can save companies like Disney, Pixar $40 million per film, just in time save. But what does it do for us? We can have Elvis right now performing on a stage. He can interact. We can have an Elvis historian behind stage, and somebody in the crowd ask Elvis a question. That historian can speak, and that will then shift Elvis's face.
So you guys working on voice also?
Yeah. Well, voice works. Yeah, it's all artificial intelligence.
What are you doing with AI? No.
Have you looked into the Magic Leap technology?
Yeah, Magic Leap is interesting. They don't really have anything. I know, you know, they had an infusion of $500 million, and they don't have anything.
Right.
I think it's great for us. It was great because they're worth $1 billion, and what we have, it was the first appraisal we had of our company. So Magic Leap, you know, God bless them, man. They got $500 million.
Have you talked to Paul McCartney yet?
It's funny you say that. You know, everyone says the Beatles all the time. You know, but we look at, you know, guess Elvis is one of the most adored performers demographically, 18 to 34-year-olds. You would never think so. 18 to 34-year-olds. Jackson is huge in Asia. So we really look for, we're not looking to do 1,000, you know, digital humans. We want to get out of the entertainment space sooner than later. We just use it to leverage ourselves up as a company. Matter of fact, the Jackson hologram, let's call it that for argument's sake, at the Billboard Awards produced 98 billion internet impressions of that. For us, it was our come-out party, if you would, so we used it wisely.
And do you see any future for any of this in, let's say, commercials? With someone using them as a spokesperson for something? I mean, imagine, you know, I mean.
We're looking at contracts right now from big makeup companies from Maryland. Chanel paid $5 million for one Marilyn Monroe photo a year and a half ago, and they used it in a campaign. $5 million. Now, we have Marilyn that can actually speak. We're actually in negotiations for a big, I can't tell you what it is, but it's bringing her back for a big company. Not only that, we were at Jamie Salter, who runs the Maryland estate, the Elvis estate, and Muhammad Ali's estate. We have our CEO goes up there every other week and spends a full week with him. We can create brand new photos, never seen before, of Elvis Presley, right? Because there's a limited amount of photos that they have of Elvis, and you've seen them all, right? Now we have new ones. So we can go to Coca-Cola, which we have. We can say we're going to give you these 10 exclusively, brand new photos of Elvis Presley, never seen before. They're yours. So how you monetize this, it never ends. It's not just on the stage. It's on television. It's on movie screens, LCDs, on your iPads. We just picked up a company, bought them. They have holographic technology on an iPad. So they have not the iPad, but the cover that actually opens up at a 45-degree and iPads have this ability now. They have the cover that pops up. And now, you know, you can have this set up next to your bed in the morning. Michael Jackson can wake you up, come out as a digital hologram. So apps that you can download now and pay for those performers that you're only getting them on mugs.
So for all you would-be entrepreneurs out there, the ones who are on their way, what I heard all night from Greg is he didn't know anything about anything until he got in there and worked at it and was tenacious about it. And I watched the way you fielded these questions, and I'm guessing 4 years ago you would have said, hey, somebody help me, what are they talking about? And you knew it because you studied it and you found out what it was about. Because let's face it, when you're out there raising money, and excuse my language, nobody likes a bullshitter. I mean, they want somebody that knows what they're talking about too. The ministry background and all that mortgage stuff is great personality-wise or anything like that, but if you don't have the facts and answer questions like the technical questions that were posed, you're stuck.
And listen, I'm not the technical guy behind this stuff. If I took you out to San Francisco, believe me, you'd get an education on light, on particles, things that I put my sunglasses on when I'm out with those guys because I'm sleeping when they're talking. I close my eyes. I mean, it's deep stuff. It's Einstein depth. It really is. But I don't claim to be something that I'm not. What I am is I make stuff happen. I can start a company. I can put my skill sets behind it, and I'll help make it happen. So just always be true to yourself, you know. I'm not an animator. I think I did a show with I did a show with Donald Trump Jr. interviewed me, and he said, what do you do? I said, I don't draw. I don't make these guys. I have nothing to do with them. My job is to make sure we have all the resources to be successful, not just money. I travel to Japan, I mean Sony comes here, I know business, I know opportunity. I met with a billionaire in Tokyo. And I looked at that billionaire in the eyes and I said, I need you. He said he knew the opportunity is big. This guy actually owned property. I mean this guy actually owns property on the moon, Mars, and Venus. I swear. So you're talking to somebody, I looked at him, I said, I can sell you the Brooklyn Bridge and you can actually touch it. I mean, he bought property from the UN. And guess what? They're going to those planets. And people here own property. I looked at him and I said, I need you. Because this is a race. If we don't capitalize the company, we'll lose. Guys, hands down, money is one of the most important things. I didn't say it's the love of your life. It's important. To succeed, you need money. So I look at billionaires in the eye and I go, I need you. I need you to be a part of this. And here's why. And then he's got to make his own decisions. I will never call him, I'm pressure. I'm done. Tell them what I feel, what I believe, and why I'm doing it. So, I mean, that's just, be honest.
Is there anything else you had that you wanted to queue up to show them, or we just want to go to any questions from the audience?
Yeah, just 2 questions. If you want to see something, let me know.
Thank you so much for sharing all your insight. I think about 4 months ago, there was a startup company in Dania Beach that sold to Google for $350 million. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how South Florida is great to be outside of
I mean, as far as digital goes, or just in general?
Starting up a business, getting interest from Zurich, Tokyo.
Yeah, here's my opinion on South Florida, and I've been here for 25 years, just so you have a better understanding. South Florida doesn't have a good reputation. You know that, right? As far as business goes, it's got a huge reputation for scammers, and it really does. You know, you have some hurdles, but there's things changing here. I can tell you in the digital space, this is becoming a mecca for the digital space. So it's happening. That's the most I'll comment on. You know, I live in LA for a reason, and I have a studio in San Francisco for a reason. You know, and I have a place here in Florida, but there's a hurdle here.
Just kind of adding to that, I think people are more willing to invest in an apartment or a condo or a penthouse than they would in a startup. What do you tell people here locally?
Listen, good chance you can lose your money in a startup. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, brick and mortar, everyone always says they invest in brick and mortar. You know, when I represent a startup, it's because I really understand that I did my homework, and I understand what the risk level is. I also understand what it's going to take, what needs to be executed to succeed. And when you can kind of spell that out for an investor, a sophisticated investor will always look at your steps. And that's how they're not afraid, by the way, people don't invest, the right people don't invest because of risk. Risk is associated with everything, they know that. They don't invest because you don't have a good comprehensive plan to succeed. So I say you want to put your money in a building and hope that the market doesn't turn again, go right ahead. But if we can do these 3 steps,
How did raising money for the movie compared to raising like a seed round of funding? Did you collect the checks along the way, or did you have a target that you hit and then everybody closed on the same day? And was it kind of equity? How did you give out those, how did you go about that?
for the animation film,
Sure, if you could talk about how you raise money in different structures, what works best for you, and just, you know.
each situation is different. Yeah, I mean, the Legends project was for me, it was personally, I was involved for 7 years, and I kind of evolved the way we capitalized the company. So it changed, it evolved along the way. You have to, I always say I got out of bed every day, I had to figure out how to do it every single day. So things changed. There was times that we put warrants on the raise, which gave existing investors discounts to come back in, but that was something that came to me in 2010, you know. And so every day you wake up and you have to figure out how to do it. By the way, there was never a day I ever woke up thinking I was going to raise $122 million I had a great team, but there was never one day that I woke up ever thinking I was going to succeed. I'd be flying cross country crying, my head against the window, so nobody can see me because I thought I was going to fail. But there's no way. There's no way I'll succeed. So you deal with tremendous amounts of doubt, but you have to get up every day and figure it out. You know, and there's no one way of doing it. Don't ever think this is how we're going to do it today, and then it might change in 3 weeks or a month. You've got to be willing. I always say an audible. You've got to be willing to call an audible. So everything evolves, and you got to change. So when we finally finished, gosh, if I showed you the entire raise and what we did and how we changed it, you'd be blown away. But it took tremendous amounts of energy to do it.
Yeah, the distributor, you said the distributor a little bit. Were there any warning signs that you might have ignored or anything like that?
Yeah, his haircut. His haircut disturbed me. I mean, when I met him, he looked like a politician to me. And I wanted to go with Open Road. Problem with Open Road, they would put no P&A money into the deal at that time. They were a new distribution. Open Road is owned by AMC and Regal, and at that time they were going to distribute films, but they would not put any P&A money in. We'd have to raise. So they looked at me and they said, "Can you raise $35 million in P&A?" I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? Another $35 million? I didn't think I'd raise this." So I didn't want that on my back. So they went with this company that was willing to put in $20 million, which they never did.
What about the majors? They weren't interested in just distribution?
Majors, you know, we owned everything.
Right.
So it's one thing if you put $25 million in your film and then you need another 40 to finish it, and Universal comes in and does it, and they get
No, but more just the distribution arm, they weren't
No, it's
interested.
not worth it to them.
Right.
They would have to put up $35 million for P&A to get the movie films.
Is it dead, in your opinion, the project? Like, why not Netflix that's investing a ton of money in kids' movies and content? And...
Here's what we're thinking. Pulse, we're looking to take it over.
Okay.
Presently, the production company has been flattened. You know, those guys, their lives, are just, you know, they're in a mess.
Yeah.
Personally, professionally, it's really hard for them. The only way this is going to work is if we infuse about $10 to $15 million into it, and we have to take it from them. And what I want to do is take it, bring it into Pulse. By the way, the studio that Digital Domain failed in was just bought back, and we were just invited back in. So we're going to launch another animation studio, Pulse will, out of Port St. Lucie. So we want to take over the Legends project, and we want so hopefully maybe in 10 years, 20 years when your kids are here, I'll come back and talk about how we turn the Legends project around.
Right. Got about 2 more questions, maybe? Go ahead.
Yeah, so after raising $122 million and it didn't work out how you expected, you go and start Pulse. From an investor standpoint, I know you said that you looked for money elsewhere. Did you assemble a team first and tell them we're going to raise the money, or did you raise the money and then find the best minds? How did you convince the best minds if you assembled it first that you were going to get the money?
Well, we didn't fail yet in Legends when we launched Pulse. So I was pretty much done with Legends. So I had a chance to be a part of this. So when we went to Zurich, we didn't fail yet. So we went out and capitalized about $4 million to start. That got us to the Michael Jackson show, which then launched the company.
And did you get the team first, or did you get the capital first with Pulse?
You got the capital first.
How'd you sell it?
How'd you sell the idea of Michael Jackson and using it on the wall?
Tupac. Yeah, when you see, I don't have the slide, but if you see the results of Tupac's hologram, it's sick what it brought to the estate.
So that was like your program.
Yeah, that, you know, remember this is a new space. This is a whole new concept. I mean, you know, just from where we are today, from where we started in May, just the acceptance of digital humans is broadly changed. So we got one more?
Yeah, gentleman right here had a question.
Oh yeah, I got a question. If you do this events fundraising talent, how come you don't work on Wall Street or Baltimore?
Wall Street.
Yeah.
If I wanted to work on Wall Street, I'd work on Wall Street.
So why do you not?
What's Wall Street? I don't want to be a Wall Street guy.
You see that quote in the back there? And I wrote it down. It was either love what I do or hate what I do. I choose the former. And that's what he's done.
I mean, it's a good question, but why Wall Street? I mean, it's...
For the money.
I raised $122 million without Wall Street. I mean, it's not money. For me, it's what I want to do. It's driven. You know, I like startups. I like taking... If you came up with an idea and it's impossible to do it, that gets my attention. I like doing big things. I like doing things that people say can't be done. So, you know, it's...
Great. So with that, please join me in thanking Greg Centineo.
Thank